Well, as Dr. Asara mentioned, this was part of an honors thesis project that I did. So today I'm just giving an overview of all that I really went a lot more in depth in my research. And this is a basic outline of my thesis. I gave a background on Nepal, background on sex slavery in Nepal, talked about the factors that contribute to sexual slavery, talked about the failed attempts that have taken place within Nepal, and then I made some recommendations for NGOs to get involved in fighting sexual slavery. So, just a background on Nepal. Nepal is one of the most impoverished countries in the world. It is the 12th most impoverished country in the world as of 2008. It has a long history of civil conflict and political instability. Nepal is ranked number 27 on the failed states list, and in order to be on this list, a state has to have political instability, there will be human rights abuses, there will be economic factors that contribute to being a failed state, and so these are some factors that play into my larger discussion. They also have, in terms of civil conflict, they have ethnic diversity. There are over 40 different tribes and ethnic groups that contribute to some of the conflict, as well as in the southern part of Nepal, there's a Maoist group that has been trying to take over the regime, and that has caused strikes and ongoing political instability. Also, Nepal was the world's only Hindu kingdom. In the 1990s, they were declared a secular state, but they still have much of the Hinduism influence as part of their social structure. Therefore, they operate with a caste structure. They have over 100 identified caste groups, and that basically means a caste is similar to a class in the sense that it's socioeconomic and it determines your occupation, but a caste is different in that it is really, you're born into it, you're born into the caste, and that really determines your role in society, people's perspective on you because of your caste. It determines your occupation and really your fate in life. So I have some photos here actually from a trip that I was able to take to Nepal, just to show you a glimpse. The bottom, what is that, your left? The bottom left is a Hindu temple, and there's an area where they still perform animal sacrifices. There on the bottom right is a picture of the housing arrangements in southern Nepal with the thatched roofs there. Up top is a picture of transportation. That picture really kind of showed that there aren't a lot of regulations in terms of transportation, and that is seen in a lot of different areas of society. And then a picture of girls there in their school outfits, but we'll get into that some more. Now, sex slavery in Nepal. Sex trafficking versus sexual slavery. Now, you may have heard more about sex trafficking recently. It is very big in the media right now because there are a lot of NGOs, a lot of nonprofit organizations that are really trying to fight this in the world. There's Free the Slaves group, and a lot of abolitionist groups are bringing awareness about sex trafficking in the world. Sex trafficking is when a child is taken from his or her home and actually abducted and brought to across borders, either within the country or across borders of the country. So they might be taken to another village within the country or another country, actually. So that's sex trafficking, but the focus of my research was actually on sexual slavery in general. Because in 2010, it says there, anywhere from 12,000 to 20,000 girls were trafficked outside of the country, the majority of which were taken to India, but there were thousands that were unaccounted for within the country. So they may have just moved to another village. Several areas of Nepal, within northern Nepal, are actually taken to the valley in Kathmandu or in Pokhara, which are the major cities. But there are also girls who actually are abducted within their own village or just forced into sexual slavery within their own village. And an example of this is the body caste. This caste group has a history of being entertainers. So they are musicians and performers for royalty and for Hindu priests. But girls within this caste are forced into sexual slavery. They will take on sex work as their occupation simply because this is their caste. And this really took hold in the 1960s, particularly because it was there were a lot of economic changes at the time, and the women were being encouraged, not, I wouldn't say encouraged, but forced into this work more regularly because of the rampant poverty, and families were expecting them to bring in an income. So the body cast was a case study as part of my thesis, and I looked into the factors that contributed to why this forced sex work is part of their life. And it was interesting because they aren't actually abducted from anywhere, taken to somewhere else, which is the sex trafficking that we hear about so often, but they are forced to be in sex work right in their own villages. So as part of my thesis, I looked at 3 factors that contribute to sexual slavery. It's economic factors, sociocultural factors, and political factors. The economic ones, I talked about the poverty. It's one of the most impoverished countries in the world, and the fact that there are a lack of alternative occupations for women. So often if a girl is forced into sex work, especially once she has performed in that occupation, there's really a lack of alternatives if she does want to get out of that. It becomes an expectation that is placed upon her. Some of the sociocultural factors are the family structure. It is very patriarchal, and if there are expectations from the family, then the girls will be brought up to believe this familial honor, that they're doing a good deed for their parents if they're taking on the role of being a sex worker. Also, the religion and the cultural traditions. I mentioned how it is predominantly Hindu, and Hinduism actually allows for a caste of prostitution. This is the body caste, but they also allow for their priests to use prostitutes. It's more of a, instead of having a relationship that is committed, it's more spiritual in a sense to not have a tie to the earth in that sense, so they will take on prostitutes. Then there's political factors as well, the corruption within the government that does allow this. The primary offenders are oftentimes the state officials, law enforcement officials. They're the ones who can actually afford the services within a brothel, so they're predominantly the offenders, whereas we would expect them to be more of the enforcement and the protectors. So there is a lack of protective and preventative policies within the political structure. But my main argument was that underlying all of these is a gender-based discrimination that exists within the economic functions, within the sociocultural structure, and within the political organization. So I applied this to girlhood in Nepal, all of those factors. And this is someone who I got to spend some time with. I'm going to let her tell you her name because I did get a chance to record it.
Mera naam Samna Pahari.
Mera naam means my name is, and Samna Parain is her name. But I wanted to play it just because I don't pronounce it quite right. But I wanted to bring a face to this girlhood within Nepal. And I did spend some time with her there were 3 days that we were in a village in southern Nepal. And one thing I noticed was that the girls there were several boys, maybe 40 to 50 boys that were out playing soccer and out running around. But I wouldn't see the girls until later on in the evening. And I thought this was because, of responsibilities at home, and that is the case. They were at home, they were helping cooking and cleaning and out in the fields helping. But the boys had more of the leisure time, and then it was the girls who were expected to be at the home. And I said that this kind of rolls into the thought of the poverty and the inequality within the family structure and inequality with education. So girls will sometimes be kept at home to help with the family responsibilities rather than being allowed to go to school. So this doesn't give them many opportunities in terms of education and occupation. Also, with the poverty factor, there are pressures on the family to have more children to help with the pressures of being in poverty. But then also, if someone approaches a family saying that I have a job for your daughter, then that becomes one less mouth to feed, in a sense. So the pressures on the family are really something that we can't quite understand in terms of saying, oh, how can someone give their child away to a trafficker? But at the same time, the poverty and then versus the promises of an income they kind of weigh out, they don't really weigh out there. Then the factors of the family structure. I mentioned the position within the household, and the girls will have this family responsibility to be caretakers. They will have the responsibility of bringing honor to their parents and pleasing their parents no matter what. And then the political factor, where there are a lack of protective policies. There aren't policies that are requiring girls to be educated to a certain age. There aren't policies that are allowing girls to, or that are making sure that they're in school and being educated in that way. Also, considering their position within society, one thing that I came across was citizenship. In order for a woman to have citizenship, she needs a father or a husband to prove her citizenship. But men are citizens if they're born in the country, and that's all the proof that they need. So just the difference within the policies that even discriminate against girls does affect their situation in society, their position in society. So Nepal in 2001 did say that they're going to commit to fighting this sex slavery, sex trafficking. They started a Ministry of Women and Children and Social Welfare, and they also created a task force to combat sex trafficking. However, I read through some of their policies, some of their programs that they're putting in place, and they all really focus on rescue and rehabilitation. They focus on rescuing girls from brothels, and they're focusing on rehabilitating girls who have been in sex work. So they're trying to train them in traditional techniques, traditional domestic roles. However, the fact that they're focusing on rescue and rehabilitation causes me to wonder, where are the preventative measures? And there really aren't many. Because they're not addressing the underlying issues. They're not addressing the factors, the socioeconomic, or the sociocultural factors, the economic factors, and the government is not addressing their own political factors, the fact that the corruption that exists within their own law enforcement officials and the corruption that exists within the own policies that are written that discriminate against women. So I made the recommendation that non-governmental organizations get involved to focus on holistic approaches to gender equality. And this gender equality will take on education, will take on promotion of alternative occupations, will take on the structuring of society to promote equality. And then we'll also have recommendations politically in terms of fighting against the human rights abuses. And so that was the position that I took, is that instead of focusing on the actual issue of sex trafficking, there is this underlying issue of the gender-based discrimination, which causes a human rights abuse. Therefore, organizations need to get involved and raise awareness to help fight the underlying issues that lead to human rights abuses. And then I also mentioned that there's a concern for the society as a whole, specifically because they have this failed state status, they're number 27, in particular because there's all these factors that do play into it, that there is an importance for bringing about equality so that women can be full participators within their society and within their own country. And that was just a glimpse of my thesis project.